pjnet.tv, a Wednesday night about 9 o'clock on the East Coast. And we are running a bumper. We are recording and we are streaming on 9 platforms. We have the background ready and the chat room is eagerly waiting. So let's switch to Studio 8 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, good evening as we begin our Wednesday edition of pjnet.tv. I'm Coach Prasick, your host, and we are going to have a wonderful night. Tonight we have 2 ladies joining us, each of them with a story to tell. And up first, in this corner, weighing in at not even 100 pounds soaking wet. I meant to kind of put this up here. Perhaps you have heard of mountain climbers, and you may have seen some of the videos. It is now almost celebrating its 1-year anniversary, and we are fortunate to have the curator of mountain climbers herself, who also has a story to tell. Whitney Ward is standing in tonight for Becky Lindsay, who is in absentia. So, Whitney, as you so well pointed out, you have big shoes to fill, but you're kind of a big person, right? You're known for your large frame and so forth. We'll save the mountain climbers for later in the broadcast because you have a story. You have climbed mountains before mountain climbers came along. Your life has been one big mountain, yet you are still standing and you are still climbing, but you haven't done that alone. It is your testimony that you had some supernatural intervention.
I did, yes. And I just want to thank you, Coach, for allowing me to come on and, share. I think it's so important for us as Christians to go back and remember where God's brought us from. Because, when we hit the, lowest point of our lives, that's typically when we see like the turning point and the beauty from ashes. And this mountain that I had to climb that I'm sharing tonight, that's so true for me. It was a low point, but it was my turning point. And I'm so excited, and I thank you for allowing me to remember this tonight. But I'm just going to start from the beginning. So back in the spring of 2011, I was a junior at Asbury University, and I started losing excessive amounts of weight. And I had severe stomach pain. And I couldn't figure out what was going on, and my doctors couldn't either. But fast forward to August of 2011, and I had my first visit at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, and I saw a GI doctor there. And he diagnosed me with a twisted small bowel. Ooh. And and that's what was causing all of the issues. And I know, you would think it would have been caught.
Yep, the plumbing was clogged up. Yeah,
exactly, it was clogged up, and the only way to fix it was surgical. And so, Coach, I was getting ready to go to into my senior year of Asbury, and I accepted a position as the hall chaplain of my hall, and I was just really blooming in ways that I've never bloomed before, and I just had this confidence that I never had, and my disease had taken so much from me, and I didn't want it to take this from me too, and my doctors did want me to have the surgery as soon as possible, but I was just going to stand on faith that God opened these doors for me, and my disease wasn't going to take this from me too. So I came up with a plan. My doctors, they agreed reluctantly, and then I talked to my professors at Asbury, and what I decided to do was start my senior year and regularly step into that position as a hall chaplain. And then at the end of the year, if you remember what it was like when you were in college, those last 2 weeks, you had the week of final projects. And then the very last week was finals week. So what I decided to do was take those 2 weeks and combine them. So I did the final projects and I did all my finals during the same week. And I had my surgery during what should have been finals week. Okay. So I could have my surgery and then I could rest and recuperate for 3 weeks.
Right.
and then go back and, finish my degree and graduate from Asbury University. And, I did that. And looking back, I wouldn't change a thing, but I got very sick at the end. I was very, very sick. I looked like a skeleton. It was so hard to keep food down. It was terrible. And Coach, that surgery I was going into was my 26th surgery.
Oh gosh,
And
Whitney.
it was my 26th surgery. And up until then, I had absolutely no issues. But when I left school, I just had this foreboding, feeling. And I wasn't sure if I was going to go back. It was just this gut feeling. And so it was hard to leave. I worked so hard so I could go back, but I wasn't sure if I was going to come back. And so I had the surgery, and it did. It went very well. So, I was like, okay, check. I'm okay. All is well. So then, what happened after I went home from surgery, no one saw coming. So my surgery was on a Tuesday, and then, this was in December. My surgery was on a Tuesday, and I came home on a Sunday, and that very next Monday, my body just went downhill. And, hindsight's always 2020. We don't know why this happened, but there's some factors. So, it was a bowel surgery. So I couldn't eat 2 days before the surgery. And then when I woke up, I had an NG tube down my nose that pumped my stomach. And it could not come out until my stomach was healed. And so that meant for a total of 8 days, I did not eat any solid foods. And so when I actually came home from the hospital, I weighed 75 pounds. So yeah, it was bad. Also, there was a fact that, I was due for my 6-month treatment in January. But like we talked, this was my 26th surgery. I had no issues, No one knew that I probably needed that. And so I went back to the hospital on Monday. And then by Tuesday, my body started shutting down. I didn't know my parents. I was talking out of my head. I was pretty much unconscious for a lot of the time. And when I did wake up and my eyes were open, my body was locked within itself. I cannot speak. I cannot tell anyone what I was feeling. I couldn't tell anyone my fears or anything. And the redness in my gums and my eyes disappeared. They were completely white. You couldn't tell my body from the white sheet that was on top of me. My blood pressure went down to 60/30. My pulse was, non-existent. And my hematologist looked at my parents and he said, if she makes it, we're going to have to think about a bone marrow transplant. And when he left, my dad looked at my mom and he was like, did you hear what he said? He said, if she makes it, he doesn't think she's going to make it. And so that was scary. And they pretty much knew what was wrong. They were pretty sure that I was experiencing all the classic symptoms of a low hemoglobin. But they had to get a hemoglobin to know what it was. And my veins were shot, severely dehydrated. So they actually had to lift my bed up as high as it would go, take my arm and hang it over the bed, start at my shoulder, and squeeze down just for one drop of blood. Wow. And they would run it to the lab. They would run it to the lab, and every time they would run it, it would clot. And so finally, they got it. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the hemoglobin, it's the blood count that it carries the oxygen throughout the body and the brain. And it's supposed to be between 12 and 14. And so we finally got the news, and it was not good. My hemoglobin was 2.8. And that's just, that's life-threatening. And so my hematology team made the decision, we got to bring the ICU team here. We think you should go to ICU, but the ICU attending has to come. And, you know, like I said, I barely had any oxygen going to my brain. And that's why I was acting like I was acting. And so the ICU team, it came up, and the ICU attending was like, we got to get oxygen on her. And so they did. And I tell you what, Coach, they put the oxygen on me, and it was like a light bulb. Like, you know, my eyes just flew open. And, you know, because my body was craving that. Mm-hmm. And I woke up to about 8 to 10 doctors standing around me, like stark fear in their eyes. And I remember my mom, she's like, Whitney, you know, you remember when your hemoglobin a few years ago dropped to 4.8? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, it's like that now because, you know, they cautioned my parents, her body can't take any stimulation. She can't get excited. She can't get scared. We have to keep it, you know, very calm. But you know what? Even in those scary times, God gives you things where you can look back and laugh and have some lighthearted moments. I remember the ICU doctor getting really close to me, and she goes, Whitney, what's your name? Well, let's go with Whitney. That sounds good. I like that. Let's do it. So, you know, that was comical. You know, I can look back, you know, now and laugh at that. But, you know, the decision was, you know, she's going to have to come to ICU. So as they were rushing me to ICU, they had my parents fill out all these forms, you know, mm-hmm. that if extreme measures mm-hmm. are needed, mm-hmm. are we allowed to do this? And, you know, of course, my parents are filling out all these forms, and they told my parents, you know, she's going to receive several units of blood. We're going to go ahead and give her 6-month treatment. And we're also going to give her an antibiotic. And the most common side effect of this antibiotic is that it turns a person from the scalp to the feet blood red. And we also want you to know that her body is hanging on by a thread. And it's imperative that she has no reactions to any of the treatments that we're giving her. But see, what my parents knew is up until that point, with my 6-month treatment, and every time I received a blood transfusion, I had severe reactions all the time. And so, you know, their thought was, how is she going to survive this? I mean, they really did not know if by the next morning I would be there. And so, anyway, the ICU team, they ushered my parents into the waiting room because they had to hook me up to, you know, machines and get vitals and all that. And when my parents walked into the waiting room, they thought it was kind of weird because, save them, there was only one man in the waiting room, and this was about 11:30 at Tuesday night. And if you've been in waiting rooms, you know, like, they're usually full, and you get to know the people in the waiting room, and you guys have that common bond because, you know, you're fighting for your loved one, and you get to encourage each other. And, you know, that night ICU was maxed to capacity, and there was no one else in the waiting room save this one man. And, you know, my parents thought that was weird, but they're like, okay, we're gonna start calling people and ask them to pray for our daughter. And so they did, and, you know, my mom called her friend, and my mom just broke. And my dad took the phone from my mom, and all of a sudden, that man got up from his chair. He walked over to my mom, and my mom said the first thing that she noticed was that he had the clearest, bluest eyes that she had ever seen. And he said, "What's the child's name?" And my mom said, "It's Whitney." And he said, "Okay, I'm going to put her on the prayer chain." He didn't say my church's prayer chain. He didn't say I'll let my pastor know. He said the prayer chain. And he turned around and he walked out. And my parents never saw him again. He wasn't in the hallway. He wasn't in another patient's room. And every single other night that I was in ICU, the waiting room was completely full. And my parents and I, we have no doubt that that man was an angel sent from God to give us a message of hope at the exact time that we needed it. Because once he left, I had absolutely no reaction to any of the treatment that I was given for the first time in my life. And I started to get better faster than a person should with a hemoglobin that low. And like, my doctors were blown away. They could not believe it. And just to put this in perspective for you, Coach, I had my surgery on a Tuesday, went home on a Sunday, went back to the hospital on a Monday, was rushed to ICU on Tuesday, late Tuesday night, went back to a regular room Thursday morning, and then that Saturday, on December 24th, 2011, I got to go home. And it was like the best Christmas gift ever. And you know what? I went back 2 weeks later and finished my degree. And like it never happened. And you know what? I haven't looked back since. And so angels are real. Miracles are real. If you need that hope tonight, I'm here to give it to you.
Well, God is very real. And you don't have to be in an extreme circumstance
So true.
to experience the extreme sovereign power of prayer. And it's hard to hear that kind of testimony without feeling the emotions that come from that. But here's I've made this point before. I'd like to use this opportunity to make it again. We find ourselves in situations where we see an ambulance going down the road. We see a life flight helicopter racing across the skies.
Yeah.
How much does it cost to engage the supernatural power of God?
Yeah.
It costs nothing.
It doesn't.
There are times when we see people hurting around us. How much does it cost to invest a moment of prayer in someone? Now, Whitney, your camera is pixelating. If you can still hear me, which you can. Okay.
I can.
What I'm going to do is see if we can still hear you, and we've only got a couple of minutes left, but assuming that, I messed up there. There. Hang on. Your camera was starting to pixelate, and it's funny because the whole time you were sharing your testimony there was no problem, and you're done now. But I've put the Mountain Climbers logo on the screen. We've got about 3 minutes. You are about to celebrate 1 year of Mountain Climbers. You have spoken about it before here on PJNet, but since that time you have increased the frequency. You have also engaged some new guests. So if you don't mind, spend a couple of minutes and give us an update on what's going on, and tell us a little bit, look over the horizon and tell us what's in the future for Mountain Climbers.
That's been really cool. Like Coach said, a year's coming up, and I'm so grateful. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has encouraged me, prayed for me, and just supported me. And that's why Mountain Climbers has made it to a year. But I have a very special project coming up to celebrate a year, and that will drop on Monday, July 27th. And I'm so excited about that. Looking into the future, I'm really excited because I actually am working on a Mountain Climbers studio. And once that's set up, that's where all my guests will come, unless I do them through Zoom. And they'll come there, and we'll do our interview there. I'm scheming and dreaming about creating Mountain Climbers merchandise in the future. So we'll see what God does with that. So, yeah, I'm just so excited. God took this ministry and went above beyond with it. I could have never done what God's done with it. So I'm just going to let him keep doing it, and I'm just going to be his vessel.
What made you think of doing that? I mean, where'd that come from? Just woke up one day and said, I'm going to give this a shot?
Well, I will tell you, it's a God thing. I was at the Right to Publish conference in Chicago in June, and I was actually in a marketing class, and they were talking about, like, when you video yourself the correct way, to video yourself, here's what you need to do. And mountains is like a theme of my platform, being more than your mountains. And God just kind of like plopped it into my head and said, people have given you an avenue and a venue to share your story. Why don't you be that for them and call it Mountain Climbers? And went from there, and God just took it. So like I said, it's all him, and I just pray he keeps using me.
Okay. Well, I'm proud of you for doing it. There are plenty of people out there that talk a good game, but when it comes time to doing it, and we all face it, we all have mountains to climb, and you know, you've brought some interesting stories of mountain climbers on there. But the truth is, folks, we are all climbing some kind of mountain, and some are more steeper than others, some are rockier than others. But the view's always pretty good from the top of that mountain. So nonetheless. Well, Whitney, you have got the chat room in tears, and thank you for sharing that powerful testimony. And you
Thank
always,
you for this opportunity.
well, you're always welcome here as part of the PJNet family, Whitney. So thank you for sharing, and God bless you. And you have blessed us, and we appreciate your story. Thanks.
Thank you.
Whitney Ward of Mountain Climbers. What a story! You know, that's what we do here. PJNet, our purpose is to provide a platform for everyday Christians to share their walk with Christ. At the bottom of the hour, as always, on Wednesday night, Michelle Medlock Adams will be joining us, and I've got to do some work between now and then. And while I'm doing that, I would like you to contemplate two questions. The first question is, what is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? And the second question is, how long ago was that? Folks, if we're going to climb the mountain and be victorious, we must never allow ourselves to be satisfied with either answer.